Westwood One presents America at Night. Here's your host, McGraw Milhaven.
Here's my favorite part. There we go. There we're off and running. Wednesday night, America at Night. Thanks for tuning in. As always, we got quite a bit of sports coming up. We got the Kentucky Derby this Saturday, the fastest 2 minutes in sports. And 6 weeks from now, it's the World Cup. We'll get to that in just a second. Next hour, we're going to talk to a man who has written the definitive book on the Rolling Stones, the biography, Bob Spitz. He wrote a book about the Beatles, about Led Zeppelin. Now he's turned his attention to the Rolling Stones, and he's getting a lot of great press on this book called The Rolling Stones. Some advanced praise for the Rolling Stones. We'll talk about that next hour. Hour 3, of course, is your phone calls and text messages. This first hour, though, the World Cup is 6 weeks away. The first match, the United States is going to play Paraguay, and the world is coming to America. There's only one problem. Well, the match is going to be June 12th in Los Angeles, and there is a story out tonight from the Wall Street Journal that there are plenty of tickets left. The Wall Street Journal is reporting that ticket prices are soaring. They're using dynamic pricing. What does that mean? Well, they're trying to jack up the prices as much as possible. A single seat in the upper corner of SoFi Stadium is going for $1,120. A better seat, you could pay as much as $4,000. Now, that's not on the scalping sites. That's the actual price that FIFA have set for itself. People are complaining, saying these prices are just ridiculous. And people are waiting to see if the prices are going to come down. But as of now, there are plenty of seats available for the U.S. game against Paraguay. And this was supposed to be the hottest ticket in the country. We're going to talk about affordability this hour because last week we had on a Maryland official who was talking about not surge pricing, but surveillance pricing. And that is just only one of the things that is causing prices to spike. We're going to talk to a woman who has written the book about price gouging in America. The book is called Gouged, The End of Fair Price in America, and she does a deep dive into all of the industries that are using surveillance and price gouging and using our own phones against us to jack up the price. So when we come back, affordability this first hour, we are going to be joined by the author of that book and talk about what exactly is going on from airlines to gas to food to rent to housing to mortgages to everything. Affordability is the topic this first hour. Stay right there. America at Night. We're just getting started.
From the heart of America, this is America at Night with McGraw Milhaven. Welcome to America at Night with McGraw Milhaven.
It's all about affordability. Prices are not going down, they're going up. And there seems to be not just the tariffs are a problem, not just the oil prices are going up, but it seems that corporate America has figured out to figure out a way to figure out how much we would actually pay, depending on who we are and our individual profile. Lindsay Owens joins us. She is the executive director of an organization called Groundwork Collaborative. It's a Washington-based think tank, and she has written a book coming out this fall called Gouged, The End of Fair Price America. It investigates how the death of the fixed price tag is eroding the American middle class. Lindsay Owens, welcome to America at Night.
Thanks so much for having me.
So earlier last week, I guess we were talking about the state of Maryland and how they tried to ban this surveillance pricing versus surge pricing. What did you think of that bill, this first step by Maryland?
Yeah, it's been really, really wonderful to see how much enthusiasm there is in states across the country for starting to crack down on surveillance pricing. This is, for folks who aren't familiar with it, the practice, the corporate practice of companies spying on you and then using the data they learn from that spying for the express purpose of overcharging you. Think of it as a company taking a look into your wallet and then based on how much they see in there, deciding how much they're going to charge you for any given item. So this is really the worst of the worst when it comes to corporate practices, and states across the country are saying enough. Colorado is moving forward with legislation. New York is moving forward with legislation to ban this practice. Unfortunately, the Maryland bill really leaves a lot to be desired. So for starters, it only applies to grocery and food delivery, and we know that surveillance pricing is rampant in sectors, really across the economy, not limited to food prices. The second problem with the Maryland legislation is it exempts companies who want to use surveillance pricing as long as they have your consent. And of course, as we know, in so many settings across the economy, we end up signing away our rights without realizing it because it's buried in the fine print. And so it's really frustrating to see that kind of loophole for consent. There were also some other technical problems with the legislation, and it was really riddled with carve-outs. It carved out loyalty programs and other promotions, which are, frequently loyalty programs are sort of a trap for surveillance pricing. They sort of lure you in with the promise of points and benefits, but what they really do is, once you hand over your information, they really start hacking in to your profile, learning more and more about you, and then using that to set prices. So really loyalty programs can be a Trojan horse for surveillance pricing. Frustrating to see Maryland carving that out as well. So I'm not thrilled with the Maryland legislation, but I am really happy with the sort of burgeoning and growing efforts across the country to crack down on this practice.
Lindsay Owens, give us a sense of what these companies are doing. How are they using our data against us?
Yeah, companies have a lot of ability to take a look at our behavior, our shopping history, and to try to predict exactly how much we're willing to pay for an item. So some of what companies do is monitor your every move when you're shopping online. So they're looking at what you click on but don't ultimately buy. They're looking at what you hover over but don't click on. They're looking at what you put in your cart but don't sort of pull the trigger on buying. They are using information about your computer. Are you a Mac user? Are you a PC user? They're looking at your geographic information. What zip code do you hail from? Are you in the app? Are you online on a website? All of these things can give them a little bit of information about you as a user, other demographic information, maybe some information about your income or your race or gender. All of this gives them a little bit of a sense of how willing you are to pay for an item and how much you might pony up for an item. And the idea here is instead of offering a fixed, transparent price where you and I pay the same amount for the same item at the same time, or where we can at least see what the price is, companies are changing the price without us realizing it. So you might pay more than me, and I have no idea because I don't see what you're charged. Or the price may change from one day to the next. We realize we could have gotten a better deal, the following day, for example.
So I read a story that the big box stores can geofence you, and if you're in the parking lot at a big box store looking for a widget, it's one price on your phone in the parking lot, but if you go into the store, it's a different price. Is that possible?
Yeah, look, you if you're using an app, if you buy your coffee using the Starbucks app, or you log into the Walmart app in the parking lot before you go into the Walmart, frequently you've offered your location data up, right? And so they know exactly where you are, not like approximately where you are, exactly where you are. And so that's very valuable information for companies. Look, if you're in the parking lot of the Walmart, you're probably a sure thing. You're probably going to go in, you're probably going to buy some stuff. And so location data is very valuable for companies.
You mentioned zip codes. There's an old saying with construction companies that say they zip code price. And if you want a new patio and you live in a high rent zip code, they're going to charge you more than if you live in a working class zip code. They're just doing that on a larger scale with your phone and your app and everything you buy?
Yeah, there was a kind of early example of surveillance pricing, a few years back, where Princeton Review, the test prep company for the SAT and the ACT, was found to be charging folks who logged on from zip codes that had a higher percentage of Asian American residents more than other individuals who logged on from zip codes with lower percentage of Asian American residents. So, for some time now, companies have used kind of crude metrics like zip code to approximate income and race and other features that they think might help them to know how much you're willing to pay for an item. But of course now, zip code data would be sort of like, sort of easy, crude, dumb data for a company to use, because they can get so much more fine-grained, detailed data now about consumers.
Lindsay Owens with us. She wrote the book that's coming out this fall called Gouged, The End of a Fair Price in America. Let me ask the devil's advocate question. It's not illegal to charge an Asian more, or a Jewish person more, or a Catholic more, or a white person more. But should it be? I mean, shouldn't supply and demand, and so the corporation can figure out you will pay more? I mean, that's just sort of capitalism, is it not?
Look, I think price discrimination at this level, at the individual level, at the demographic level, is really dangerous for American society and for the American economy. And there are a couple of reasons for that. The first is that ultimately individualized price discrimination is this idea that a company can charge each individual the maximum they're willing to pay, take the price right up to the pain point, and get you to your maximum. And the result is that companies are able to, what economists might say, extract all of the consumer surplus, right? Take every cent that you could pay for a given item. And this is obviously not how we want to live, and it's not how we want to shop, right? We don't want to pay the maximum price for every single item in a sandwich, for the bread, for the turkey, for the cheese, for the tomato, right? And that's where surveillance pricing is headed. The other problem with surveillance pricing and this unpredictable and pricing that lacks transparency is it makes it really hard to comparison shop. And at its core, sort of comparison shopping and the very existence of bargain hunters who are price sensitive and comparison shop, they are a really critical function in the American economy, because they are the mechanism for disciplining the market and keeping prices competitive. So the fact that, I can go to store A and see that the price is high, and then go to store B and see that the price is lower, and then take my business to price B helps keep price A in check, right? And so when we can't actually comparison shop because prices are shifting, because prices are varying by individual, in addition to a store-to-store or brand-to-brand or product-to-product, high-price product, premium product versus bargain product, it makes it really hard to keep markets competitive and fair. And so I think this, this particular type of pricing is really taking things too far. And I think that's why so many lawmakers across the country, more than 20 states now considering legislation to ban this practice, federal legislation now being introduced to ban this practice in both the House and the Senate. Bipartisan interest in this. We've seen hearings from the Republican House as well as Democrats. I think it's because we all know that there's something amiss here, and this is just taking, pricing and the consumer exploitation much too far.
Yeah, that was my next question. The Republicans and Democrats can't agree on anything, and yet they are finding common ground on this surveillance. Talk about that for a moment. What are we hearing? What are we seeing from some of these elected officials?
Yeah, I mean, at the federal level, it's a little too early to give, either party a lot of credit here because we haven't actually seen any movement on legislation in Congress. But we know that, Republican committee members have opened investigations into surveillance pricing, in particular, taking a look at whether or not the airlines are using surveillance pricing. In the Transportation Committee, we know that President Trump's Federal Trade Commission opened an investigation into Instacart's pricing practices at the end of last year when my organization worked with Consumer Reports and More Perfect Union to expose a vast experiment that Instacart was running on millions of Americans while they shopped for groceries that resulted in some Americans paying up to 23% more for items in their grocery cart than other Americans. So, this has caught the attention of lawmakers on both sides of the aisle. And frankly, we know that 80% of Americans or more, depending on the poll, aren't interested in surveillance pricing and think it's a problem. And so this is not one of those issues where there's daylight between Republicans and Democrats. It's an issue that I think speaks to a core moral value. Virtually all of us think that this is unfair and should be stopped in some way.
Dr. Lindsay Owens is with us. She's an executive director of the Groundwork Collaborative, and she's written a book coming out this fall called Gouged, The End of a Fair Price in America. If you would like to ask a question or text in a question, 1-844-2-McGraw, 1-844-262-4729. Stay right there. We're just getting started. The book is Gouged, The End of a Fair Price in America. It's on Amazon now for the same price today as it is when the book comes out this fall. There is no surveillance pricing when it comes to the book Gouged, The End of a Fair Price in America. Back in just one moment.
This is America at Night with McGraw Milhaven. This is America at Night with McGraw Milhaven.
She is the executive director of an organization called Groundwork Collaborative, and she's written a book called Gouged, The End of a Fair Price in America. It's due out this fall. Dr. Lindsay Owens is our guest. Doctor, it was recently announced that Walmart is going to have digital price tags. Explain the benefit for Walmart and the detriment of the consumer when it comes to digital price tags.
Yeah, there is a lot going on in pricing news at Walmart right now, and it's really quite concerning. So you're right. They are rolling out electronic shelf labels or digital price tags at all Walmart stores in the United States by the end of the year. The benefit for Walmart is several-fold. The first is they are cutting back on labor costs. If they can automatically change pricing using an algorithm that sends price changes to these digital shelf labels, they don't need, Walmart workers pricing items, right? And so they're looking for efficiencies, as they would call it. You and I would call it, getting some of the labor costs down, right? They have sworn up and down that they won't use these electronic shelf labels for surge pricing. But the future is quite clear, which is that a company like Walmart that installs electronic shelf labels is building the infrastructure for in-store dynamic pricing. We see dynamic pricing all the time in e-commerce. Now with electronic shelf labels, we could see it in brick and mortar stores. The worst case scenario is that the algorithm at Walmart headquarters in Arkansas is set such that if the temperature in name your city reaches 90 degrees, the price of ice cream goes up. If the temperature reaches 30 degrees, the price of soup goes up, right? Those are the kinds of changes that a company could make using, reasonably, modestly sophisticated algorithms and electronic shelf labels. We know this is likely the future for a few reasons. The first is it's already happening in Europe, where they've had electronic shelf labels for quite some time now, and America has been relatively late to adopt the practice. But the other reason why I worry that we're headed to a dark place at Walmart is because we recently learned that Walmart was granted several new patents for new pricing technologies they have been building to use consumer data that they collect from Walmart.com, from in the app, to help them with their pricing. They talk about offering personalized discounts. They talk about using it to manage their inventory. But what it says to me is Walmart is bulking up on pricing, getting more sophisticated, and they're also protecting these new pricing technologies with patents. They expect them to be lucrative for the company. We also know that Walmart is getting more invested in Sparky. Sparky is Walmart.com's chatbot that you can use on the website or in the app to help you with shopping. And we heard the Walmart CEO on their most recent earnings call say that customers who use Sparky are spending 30-35% more than customers who don't. And they are working with Sparky to help the chatbot get better and better at really becoming what I think of as a closer, making sure that if you log on, you end up putting something in your cart. If you put something in your cart, you end up buying it, right? You end up checking out with as much as possible. And so I do think Walmart is really doubling down on their data and pricing business, their data arm, Scintilla, becoming increasingly important to Walmart's bottom line. And I think the electronic shelf labels really don't bode well for consumers who depend on low and transparent pricing at stores like Walmart.
Is it as technical or as advanced as you walk by a product at Walmart with your phone and it reads your phone and the price is X, and then I walk by 5 minutes later on my phone and that same product is X plus? Is it that advanced yet?
Yeah, I mean, there are some really concerning signs here. I mean, I don't want to get too dystopian, but there are now 2 companies that actually install cameras in freezer doors, right? So you go to the freezer section to pick up chicken tenders for your toddler, like I do, and it sort of clocks who you are. Are you a woman? How old are you? Are you with a toddler, right? And can use that information to decide whether or not to discount a product, for example, or whether to charge you more for a product. Those same cameras embedded not only in sort of cooler door screens, freezer door screens, but also in the screens that you might see at an end cap or a kiosk within the grocery store. And so it's not just, your phone data in the app. It's also now a broader array of facial recognition and other surveillance technologies being piloted in stores, across the country, to get more sophisticated at doing pricing. And so I think we are headed to a world where, let's say you and I leave work at the same time. We both head to the grocery store at the same time. We make a quick stop at the grocery store on the way home before we cook dinner. And you make the red light and I don't, right? I sit back for a couple more minutes. It's possible that you'll get better deals than I do if prices are changing that frequently in brick and mortar stores. So this is quite unprecedented for nearly 150 years now. We've had transparent, predictable, public posted prices, right? You walked into the store, saw the price tag, you paid the same amount. This was, relatively modern invention in human history. For thousands of years before that, we haggled, right? You and I had to kind of barter for the best price, and you were wearing nicer clothes than me. Maybe they charged you more. I had a little dirt on the merchant. I got a deal, right? Because he knew I had a little something on him, right? This is the law of the land for thousands of years. But, for 150 years now, we've had a price tag. John Wanamaker, the Pennsylvania merchant who built Wanamaker's department store, credited for the first use of the price tag. There was a business case for the price tag. Haggling was time intensive. The price tag was quicker. But there was also a moral case for the price tag, and Wanamaker was a religious man, and he was inspired by the Quakers who came before him, who eliminated haggling because they felt like it was unfair. Every man equal under God. Every man should pay the same price at the checkout counter. And Wanamaker was interested in the Quakers' model of fair pricing for you and I, installed it in his department store. And that's been kind of, there hasn't been a law necessarily requiring it, but it's been something, it's been a norm in the marketplace for over a century. And it really feels like in the last 10 or 15 years, that standard, that norm is being completely upended and eroded. And it's really frustrating. I think it's time to revisit what shoppers and consumers are owed in our economy and sort of update our basic bargain between retailers and shoppers for the digital era.
Dr. Lindsay Owens with us for a couple more minutes. Her book coming out this fall is called Gouged, The End of a Fair Price in America. You mentioned Europe and the digital price tag. Has Europe banned this? Has anywhere in the world more advanced than us in trying to curtail this surveillance pricing?
There's some interesting guardrails in some of the European countries around how electronic shelf labels are used. So here are a couple of examples. We have seen cases where in certain countries, you have electronic shelf labels because they're efficient and maybe labor saving, but prices don't change when the store is open. So if you and I go into the store at different times of day, we would see the same price. All price changes take place at night when the store is closed. We have also seen electronic shelf labels in Europe used for pro-social causes, in particular to try to reduce food waste. Makes a lot of sense to lower the price aggressively, the day that bread expires, the day that milk expires. For some people getting that lower price point, using it that day makes a lot of sense, right? So there are some, I think, really nice ways to use these electronic shelf labels. I've heard Benjamin Applebaum, the New York Times editorial writer, proposed an idea late last year that if we were going to use dynamic pricing and electronic shelf labels, things like that, we could have a set time where the price changes. 6 a.m., you change the price, you keep it stable for the rest of the day. And that way, companies still have to compete on price all day, right? Because the price is set at the beginning of the day. So I think there are a lot of ways to do this better. Right now, we have a sort of unregulated Wild West in this space. And frankly, the major impediment to the most egregious uses of this technology is ultimately consumer backlash, right? Is angering your customer base so much that you have to walk these technologies back or curtail them. And so, that's really the main thing kind of keeping this problem from getting even worse than it already is. Which is why I think, Congress stepping in, trying to get some laws on the books to reset the rules of the road here would be very welcome.
Dr. Owens, tell the story of the Instacart investigation you did along with Consumer Reports back in December of 2025.
Yeah, so we did a really, really interesting study. We knew that Instacart had purchased an AI pricing company called Eversight back in 2021, and Eversight advertised its ability to create basically wide-scale pricing experiments on a platform, on an online e-commerce platform. So Instacart buys Eversight and decides that they can start building out pricing experiments on groceries and figuring out using sort of sophisticated A/B testing how much you'll pay for bread, how much I'll pay for bread, how much you'll pay for pasta, how much I'll pay for pasta, et cetera. So we were interested in exploring how problematic these experiments were, and frankly, just how much these experiments were costing Americans. Americans are upset with the rising costs of food, and we're curious, is Instacart making it worse? And if so, how much worse? So we turned their experiment back on them. Consumer Reports recruited more than 400, I think of volunteers, but I would call them secret shoppers. I used to work in retail. We were always petrified of secret shoppers. I don't know if any secret shoppers ever came in, but my manager always told me that I better use the folding board in case the secret shopper came in. So I dutifully used the folding board, but so we got some revenge here, and we recruited a bunch of secret shoppers, and we just had them log into the Instacart app, set a pickup location for the same grocery store, 4 different locations across the country, and buy the exact same basket of items. We had them buy breakfast items like cereal, lunch items like deli meat, produce like apples. We had them buy store brand items as well as generic brand items or premium items, branded and generic. And then we had them take a screenshot of their cart, right? So we knew exactly how much they were charged for each item. Then we ran the numbers. We entered all of the data, logged all of the prices, and what we found was really stunning. In fact, so stunning that I had the team run the numbers a second time just to make sure we didn't make a mistake. But what we found is you and I could be charged up to 23% more for the exact same item from the exact same pickup location at the exact same time. And across all 20 plus items in the basket, we saw differences that could amount to $1,200 a year for a family of 4. That's using Instacart's own assessment of how much families spend on groceries across the year. And so the Instacart tax was real, and it was high. I mean, $1,200 is, a month's rent in some cities, right? This is Instacart really gilding the lily with these pricing experiments. So we published the report. It was on the cover of the New York Times, the cover of the New York Post. More Perfect Union produced a viral video that got millions of views. It's actually been nominated for an Emmy for investigative journalism. And within 2 weeks, Instacart announced that it would stop these pricing practices on the platform. So, we're still monitoring Instacart pricing, making sure they are indeed stopping these practices, keeping them honest. And but it was really a great study, a great outcome, and I think really shows what how you can expose these practices as consumers and shine a light on them and sort of get results in a much speedier timeline than you might get if you're toiling to get a bill through Congress, which I used to do when I was younger in Washington, D.C.
So, Dr. Lindsay Owens, I got 1 minute. Is there anything we can do as consumers while we wait for legislation to come down to protect us?
Yeah. I don't think it should be our job to duck and dodge and bob and weave to try to beat the machine. It's Congress's job to make markets fair and honest. But you're right. They're not moving fast. So what can we do in the interim? The first is raise your voice. When you see something, say something. Consumer backlash is a major disciplinary force for a lot of these companies. They worry about touching the stove. go to TikTok, go to Twitter, go to Reddit, go to Nextdoor, let people know when you see one of these practices, right? Take a screenshot. But the other thing I'll say is update how you think about things like comparison shopping. It's no longer okay just to look across brands. You need to look at the price in the brick and mortar store, the price on the website, the price in the in-app store, the price when you're logged in, the price when you're not logged in. Ask your husband to look up the price, right? See where you can get a lower price. So I think a sort of more capacious definition of comparison shopping and a different approach to comparison shopping can be useful in some instances.
The book is coming out this fall, and I suspect it's going to get a lot of attention when it does. The book is called Gouged, The End of a Fair Price in America. Dr. Lindsay Owens, thank you very much for your time. Fascinating conversation. Thank you.
Thanks so much for having me.
You got it. America at Night. Back in a moment.
America at Night with McGraw Milhaven.
All right, next hour. Stay right there. We're just getting started on a Wednesday night. The definitive book on the Rolling Stones. There's a whole lot of advance praise for a new book by Bob Spitz on the Rolling Stones. So we're going to do that. Plus, we'll take your phone calls in hour number 3. Don't forget, this show gets turned into a podcast every single night. If you miss any portion of the show, you want to hear it again, all you need to do is go to where all fine podcasts are housed, and you sign up for America at Night, hit the button, subscribe, and it'll be sent right to your device, and you can never miss a show. Also, you can always text the show, 1-844-2-McGraw, and you can call and ask for a rundown each and every night. Alex will send you the link. Rolling Stones next hour. Our executive director is Alex Hinton. Our engineer tonight is Richard Good. I'm McGraw Milhaven, and this is America at Night on Westwood One.
Westwood One presents America at Night. Here's your host, McGraw Milhaven.
Coming up this hour, we're going to talk about the Rolling Stones. There's a brand new biography out called The Rolling Stones, the biography by Bob Spitz. He has written stories on the Beatles and Led Zeppelin, and he's been influenced by Bruce Springsteen and Elton John. He wrote a book about Julia Child and Ronald Reagan, and now he's turned his talents to the Rolling Stone. We'll talk with him coming up here in just a minute. But we got a couple of texts I wanted to get to. Stan in Rapid City, South Dakota texts in, Scott hijacks your show. Limit his ramblings on and taking over when you try to respond. Oh, my goodness. Raymond in Oregon texts in, were there no King's protesters at the King's speech in Washington, D.C.? It's a great point. The Democrats cheering King Charles as he came to Washington, D.C. A week or so after they all went to a No Kings rally. America is the best. It's hilarious. Beth in Indiana writes, Dear McGraw, I've never listened to an evening talk radio program in my entire life. However, America at Night has become my guilty pleasure as I find myself wandering away from the living room this time of night to listen to your show on the radio in the kitchen as I clean up after dinner. My kitchen has never been so clean. Thank you for making the show worthy of looking forward to. Thank you, Beth. Here's one from Kara in Michigan. I absolutely love the show and love baseball. I look forward to your show every night. And here's another one. Love the common sense person you are. It's so refreshing and delightful to listen to. So there you go. How about that? Amanda in Alabama writes, I'm still tuning in tonight, and I appreciate everything you do. an embarrassment of riches. What's going on? Where are all the haters? The haters must have taken a night off. Next hour, we're going to have open phones. If you want to ask a question of our guests, you can certainly text in your question, 1-844-2-McGraw or 1-844-262-4729. I'll try and work that into the conversation. But the Rolling Stones, still together after all these years. The book is called The Rolling Stones, The Biography. We'll talk to the author next segment. Stay right there. America at Night. Back in a moment.
Live from coast to coast, this is America at Night with McGraw Milhaven. This is America at Night with McGraw Milhaven.
Some bands don't last 6 days. Some bands are lucky to last 6 years. The Rolling Stones, 6 decades. Bob Spitz is out with a new book, The Rolling Stones, The Biography, out last week. Bob, welcome to America at Night.
Hey, it's so great to be here with you. I'm enjoying it.
Thank you. So you wrote a book about Reagan. You wrote a book about Julia Child. You wrote a book about the Knicks. We can talk about that later. Well, I don't know if they're going to beat the Hawks, but we can talk about that later. How did you get to the Rolling Stones? Why did you settle on the Rolling Stones for your talents?
Well, you forgot a few books. I was Bob Dylan's biographer. I was the Beatles' biographer. I was Led Zeppelin's biographer. So, that was Mount Rushmore. The Rolling Stones were the only guys left. Here I was.
And so there you go. Take me back to the story in the book about how a kid named Mick Jagger and Keith Richards meet and then become friends.
They met on a train platform when they were both 18 years old. And it was like two cousins who meet at a dance and don't want to acknowledge each other. They're the only kids left on this train platform, and they've got to take the next train coming. And so they eye each other, and they kind of recognize each other, but they don't want to admit it. And pretty soon, they have no choice anymore. So Keith walks over, and he sees that, and as you said, Mick Jagger has some albums under his arm, and they're not albums Keith's ever seen before because they're blues albums. And Keith goes nuts. In the UK, they didn't have blues albums, but Mike seemed to have all the right stuff. And so, they hit it off. They talked for the next 45 minutes on the train. They decided they're going to get together and perhaps play a little music together. And here we are, 68 years later, and these guys are still playing music every night.
It's really amazing. It's so funny when basically Mick Jagger at the time tells him, "Hey, I'm in a cover band. Do you want to come play with us?" Right? So he starts off in basically a cover band.
Right, and his party piece was La Bamba. That's all Mike played over and over and over again. He didn't really care about what he sounded like. He cared about what he looked like. He always said, "I don't care how I sound. How does my hair look?"
So what was the secret sauce? There's ups and downs, and there's drugs, and there's women, and there's fights, and there's all the other reasons all the other bands break up. What's the secret sauce? How did the Rolling Stones stay together for all these years?
Yeah, the secret is Mick and Keith. They have a unique combination. Mick is the libidinous peacock and the showman, and Keith is the music maestro. And their jobs don't overlap. They have two different tasks. Mick sings, Keith plays. They are not jealous of each other. Keith's happy to let Mick be the front man. And this is where the Beatles got it wrong. This is where John and Paul went asunder. John and Paul, their heads bashed. They both wanted to be the kings of the Beatles. And in 1966, they stopped performing. So they lost contact with their audience. The secret to the Stones is they are always playing music. Either they're in the studio making music, but the minute they're out of the studio, they're performing, and they have never been off the road in 60 years. And that's the secret, because when those bad boys are off the road, that's when they get into trouble. So Mick keeps them working all the time.
And I guess it's that connection with the audience, right? They never were able to lose that connection with the audience. Even, into the 2020s, they were still on the road, still rocking and still selling out crowds.
Yeah, I saw them about a year ago in California, and the audience comes in, and who's the audience? The audience are people my age. I'm the Stones' age, a little younger than the Stones. Those people brought their kids, and those kids brought their kids. So there were grandchildren there. There were 3-4 generations of kids who came to see the Rolling Stones, and each generation knew them because they've seen them on the road. They're still playing.
So you mentioned, let's go back to the beginning, their influences was blues, and they talk a lot about Chuck Berry. They talk a lot about Buddy Holly.
Right.
Would you call their music blues, or did they take it and then put their own spin on it?
Yeah, it started as the blues. And what was so unique is that the kids here weren't listening to it. The UK kids were listening to Mississippi and Dill the Blues, the real stuff. The reason they got it is because the American servicemen who were over there during World War II left all their records when they left the UK. So all these kids got a hold of the blues records that the servicemen were listening to, and that's what Mick and Keith were listening to. And what they did was they listened to the next iteration of it, which was Chuck Berry, and that was, a black man who played the blues and souped it up with an electric guitar. And then the Stones got their hands on it, and they jacked it, and they supercharged it, and it became rock and roll. And that's what the Stones did. They took the blues, they hot-wired it, and it's what we now know is kind of garage band, ferocious, guitar-driven rock and roll.
Yeah, there's a whole lot of hooks and a whole lot of catchy tunes, right? The Stones, if you can say anything about them, you hear a song once, and you're all of a sudden hooked on that song, it seems like.
Yeah, well, Satisfaction, which is like the national anthem, it's 3 notes and 3 chords. That's all it is. But you can't get that song out of your head. You hear the opening to Satisfaction, it's like hearing the opening to Beethoven's Fifth. And they did the same thing with, Play with Fire, Let's Spend the Night Together, Jumpin' Jack Flash. It goes on and on.
So I thought, and maybe this is my own ignorance, but I thought there was a rivalry between the Rolling Stones and the Beatles because they kind of came over at the same time. The Beatles got all the attention, and the Rolling Stones came up sort of second. Is that a fair assessment of what happened?
Well, it may have looked that way at the beginning, but, the Beatles came to see the Stones very early on when the Stones were playing in a club. And the Stones were brand new. They were kids. And all of a sudden, the doors opened in the back of this club, and it was a tiny little place. And the 4 Beatles march in and stand right in front of the stage and really intimidate these guys watching them play. And everybody in that club knew the Beatles had arrived. But, the Stones weren't intimidated at all. They invited the Beatles back to their really slipshod apartment that they were staying in. And they struck up a friendship. And the truth of the matter is they never competed. When the Stones couldn't get a hit record, when they didn't know what to do, the Beatles came to the studio and wrote a hit for them, I Want to Be Your Man. And the Stones had their first hit. And even at one point, I guess it was in the late 60s, Mick Jagger and Paul McCartney went out for a beer. And while they were sitting in the pub, they decided, you know what? We're going to throw in together. Let's have the same one operation. We'll open up our own studio. We'll have our own record label. Paul McCartney even went out in Camden Town in London and bought an old brewery where he thought he could turn that into Rolling Stones and Beatles headquarters, and they'd open up a a studio there and have a hotel and a helicopter landing pad. And, it got pretty close to being reality. But while these guys, were different, their music was really different, they kind of rooted it for each other, and they remain friends to this very day.
Did they ever end up collaborating on a song together? Any of them?
Not really. When the Beatles did a few songs on Sgt. Pepper's, Mick and Keith wound up singing some harmonies on the back, and then the Stones, I think, did on Her Majesty's request, and the Beatles showed up and sang a few songs on that album too. But that's as far as they ever went to collaborating.
Was Keith Richards the writer? Was that the man? Was he the lyrics?
No, Keith was a musician. Mick did all of the lyrics. And Keith would write the music first. He could sit and work on a riff for 2 weeks. He wouldn't even get up from the couch. He would play that same damn riff over and over and over and drove everybody nuts. He could play it for hours. And at a certain point, he'd look up at Mick and he'd nod, and the song was there. Mick would write that lyric in 15 minutes. And that happened over and over again with almost everything they did.
And that's really fascinating. So the music was written first, and then Mick Jagger put the words to the music.
Yeah, that's usually the way it happens. I began my career as Bruce Springsteen's manager, and Bruce did the same thing. The music came first, lyrics came last.
Is it true that he got sick and tired of singing Satisfaction in 1975?
Oh, way before 1975. I think when, that song was written in the end of 65. And I think around 67 or 68, Mick said, I never want to sing that song again as long as I live. And, here they are, like I said before, 50 years later, singing that song every night.
Tell me about Bob Dylan, because Bob Dylan knocks on their door one day. Tell me that story.
Yeah, he's in New York. He comes to visit them. He arrives as only Dylan can arrive, in a mohair suit, kind of stoned. He wanted to get a good look at these guys. And as he walks into their hotel room, that was like the lights went out in New York and all the power went off in New York. And so they lit candles, they dragged out guitars, and what do? You sing Bob Dylan songs. And that's what they did all night. They sang Dylan songs, and then Dylan, of course, wanted to sing a few Rolling Stones songs, and it was just a jam in a hotel room.
It is amazing that the camaraderie between many of these iconic bands at the time. Is that normal? Did you find that with the other stories you wrote, that there was so much camaraderie between these groups?
Yeah, it doesn't happen so much today anymore because the money is so big. There's the shows attached to the music. There's dancers and there's huge tours. So that there's no sense of camaraderie. But in the early days, in the 60s and even the 70s, when I first got into the music business, we'd all be on the street together, or we'd all be hanging out in a bar together after our shows. It happened with the Stones all the time. There were a couple clubs in London, after-hours clubs, and you'd go into any of them and you'd see the Stones, you'd see the Beatles, you'd see the Kinks, the Hollies would be there, the Yardbirds would come in, Jimi Hendrix would wander in, and they'd trade riffs. They'd go out together. It was a really small, really close-knit community. Unfortunately, I think in the last 20 years or so, that's just gone. The money got too big. Everybody's got their mansion and their convertibles and their limousines, and they just don't feel comfortable on the street anymore.
The book is called The Rolling Stones, the biography, written by Bob Spitz, who has the Beatles, Led Zeppelin. We mentioned Ronald Reagan, Julia Child. The list goes on and on. Led Zeppelin, I mentioned. The Rolling Stones, the biography. If you have a question about the Rolling Stones for Bob, you can definitely text in the question, 1-844 McGraw, 1-844-262-4729. Text your question in, and we'll try and work that into the conversation. But lots more to get to. The sex, the drugs, the rock and roll, all of that with Keith Richards and Mick Jagger and the Rolling Stones, the biography. Bob Spitz, our guest. It is America at Night. Text your questions, 1-844-2McGraw. America at Night. Back in a moment.
Relax. You're listening to America at Night with McGraw Milhaven. Relax. You're listening to America at Night with McGraw Milhaven.
Stones, the biography. Bob Spitz is our guest. This is getting a lot of attention and a lot of great reviews. New York Times, LA Times. The book is called The Rolling Stones. Bob, we can't talk about the Rolling Stones, and you can't write about the Rolling Stones unless you talk about the drug use. And there's some new stories in here about, let's start with Mick Jagger. He came close to dying a couple of times.
He did. When you think about the Rolling Stones and drugs, you never think about Mick. It's always Keith. But in fact, I think that all the guys, except Bill Wyman, at one time or another, struggled with drugs. But there's a scene in the book where Mick comes to a friend's house, and he'd been to a party, and he'd been drinking, and he wants to get high. And somebody goes out, and he gets some heroin. And Mick not only passes out, but starts to turn blue. And the person realizes that Mick Jagger is going to die right in his apartment. It was so strange. The door opens a few minutes later, and Ahmet Ertegun, the president of Atlantic Records, shows up at this apartment with no less than Faye Dunaway, the actress. They happened to be passing by, and Faye Dunaway knew somebody at a hospital nearby, called the doctors, and really was responsible for saving Mick Jagger's life. I think that's the closest Mick ever came. Mick was not a real user of drugs regularly, but this was one instance where it was almost curtains.
Keith Richards, on the other hand, many people ask how is he still alive? And I'll ask you, how is Keith Richards still alive?
Well, it's simple. Keith is a medical miracle. That cat should have, has 9 lives, but this cat has had 9 lives about 4 times over. Keith is the ultimate bad boy. He did drugs. He always said he could handle it. How many times have you heard that? Right. I can handle it. But apparently Keith did. And for almost 30 years, Keith was a very hard drug user. There are so many instances in the book where the Stones get together to record, and Keith says, hang on, I got to put my child to sleep. The minute he said that to them, they knew that Keith was disappearing to shoot up. And he would nod out, and he'd show up 5 hours later and say, okay, I'm ready, let's go. But for some reason, Keith actually did know how to handle it. But he got to a point when he married Patty Hansen, the only time Keith's ever been married. He married a straight arrow, and he realized that life was worth living without drugs in his life, and cleaned up and has been clean for the last, 40 years. So he really found some way to turn his life around.
He's been clean for the last 40 years.
Yep, exactly right. It's what a good woman will do to you.
Yeah. Does he go and talk about AA or any of the things he's done to sort of kick the habit? Has he become, sort of a poster child for sort of being clean and sort of walk down that path at all, or is he somewhat private about it?
He talks about drugs all the time, but he sure isn't a poster boy for AA. Keith never went to AA. Keith quit cold turkey. It was brutal. It took place in Woodstock. He had two people around him, one of which was Mick Jagger, who stood over him the entire time. And it was brutal. It lasted for weeks. And it nearly killed Keith. But he went cold turkey and has never gone back. And so he's lucky. He managed to save his life.
That's a heck of a story. Bob, tell me about their heyday was the 60s, but they survived the 70s. They survived the MTV 80s, the 90s. I mean, that bands don't do that. They're still releasing albums today. What's the magic? How do you go from surviving the? I don't think any band survived the 60s and then had hits in the 80s. How explain that to me.
These guys love music. They adore it. And let's face it, the music that they're making today, it's not the most relevant music of the times, but it's pretty close. It's good. They went through a stretch in, I guess it was the mid to late 80s, where they even played disco music. And in fact, they had their biggest hit, Miss You. They survived punk rock. They survived glam. They kept playing the hits. And I think the secret is that catalog of songs. When you see a Stones concert, they just come at you one after the next. And if you're any kind of a music fan, you just, they all hit you right in the face. There's no doubt about it. And as I said before, they play. They love to play. They love to be on stage. They're always there. They're hardworking guys.
Where does the name The Rolling Stones come from?
Brian Jones. Brian Jones was actually, it's a tragic part of my book, but Brian Jones was actually the beginning of the Rolling Stones. He put the band together. He was the leader of the band before Mick took over. And one day they finally got some gigs, and a magazine called up and said, "We see that you're playing at all these places. What's the name of the band?" And they didn't have a name. And Brian looked at a few albums, and there was a B.B. King album, and Rolling Stone was on it. Muddy Waters album. And Brian went, "We're the Rolling Stones." At the time, it was Rollin, ROLLIN apostrophe. And in about 6 months, they became the Rolling Stones, and that was it.
Did they live? We talked about this earlier, but I'm fascinated by the connection between them and the Beatles. Did they live in are there fans of the Beatles and of the Rolling Stones? Or, can you be fans of both?
I am, but, it's funny. I was a Beatles fan when I was writing the Beatles book. And I heard from everybody, how can you like the Beatles? The Rolling Stones, they're the best band in the world. And now when I'm writing the Rolling Stones, the Beatles fans are nagging me. But the truth of the matter is we were so lucky in the mid to late 60s to have these two bands that were creating so much music that was the foundation of rock and roll. And they, as I said earlier in your show, these guys kind of loved each other. So we were just lucky that, you could have Beatles fans and Stones fans, and the music kind of merged.
It's also interesting going back to the blues influence and Chuck Berry, right? Chuck Berry, as great as he was, I don't think was appreciated in America as much as he should have been. And these blues stars, they find fame and fortune much more over in Europe than they do here in America. You don't hear blues radio stations, right? You hear top 40, you hear country, you hear rock and roll, but there aren't blues radio stations. And so it's so bizarre that these European acts, these people in Europe took it and made it their own. And here in America, we haven't embraced it as much as we should have.
No, and in the late 50s, let's say, in the early 60s, it was a racial thing. There were just no places where black artists could play in a white world, and so the UK embraced them. Little Richard. All these guys, Muddy Waters, B.B. King, Jimmy Reed, the great blues artists went to the UK and were treated like gods. And so they played over and over in clubs. And that's why the music grew up over there. And we didn't get it until later in the late 60s when soul emerged, and groups like the Temptations and Smokey Robinson and Aretha Franklin and the Supremes and Otis Redding took it into the mainstream.
Yeah, well, and that was Motown. Also, Miles Davis, right, one of the greats of all time, was a legend in Europe and not as well known here in America. What was the relationship between Chuck Berry and Mick Jagger?
It wasn't so much Chuck and Mick, but it was Chuck and Keith. They had a contentious relationship. Keith idolized Chuck Berry, and early on, the Stones recorded at Chess Records in Chicago, and Chuck showed up and introduced himself, and the Stones were like little boys. They just lay at his feet. But there were times when, they would encounter Chuck after a concert and come back to say hello, and Chuck would get angry and for no reason. And there were times when he decked Keith. Later on, and there's a great movie, when Chuck turned, I believe it was 60 years old, Keith organized a big concert, and they made a movie about it. I'm forgetting the title right now, but it's a wonderful film if you can get your hands on it. But there are a couple moments in there where Chuck and Keith almost come to blows, and it's all about style, all about the way they play things, their touch. Chuck had a touch that Keith emulated as a kid. And I always think that Chuck kind of resented that Keith stole his touch. And it gnawed at him. And so they really admired each other, but it was like a bad marriage.
Yeah. Are they finished touring, or are we going to get one more tour out of the Rolling Stones?
Well, we'll see. 1966 was the first year that after a tour, the press said to Mick, I guess this is it, isn't it? And every year after a tour, they would say, is this the last one? In 2000, somebody asked Keith, is this the last tour for the Stones? And he said, the last tour, man, like this is the beginning of the second half. And now here we are 26 years later. We have to start taking these guys seriously. I think that somewhere along the line, Mick and Keith went down to the same crossroads that Robert Johnson did, and they made a pact with the devil. Now, they have 2 new albums that are already in the can for next year. Keith has arthritis, so they're not touring right now. But, if you were asking me to put money on it, my money would be we'll see the Rolling Stones again.
Bob Spitz is the author. The book is The Rolling Stones. Now, we mentioned earlier, you've done biographies on Led Zeppelin, Ronald Reagan, but you've also done, you worked with Elton John, you was manager. You were manager for Bruce Springsteen, the Beatles, Led Zeppelin, now this one with the Rolling Stones. What's the trait that all these artists have that you've noticed something that was similar in all of them after doing all these books?
What a good question. And boy, it's an easy answer for me. I sat down and contemplated it one night, and there was a common thread. And that's all of them, not just the musicians, but Julia Child, Ronald Reagan. they have two qualities. They are beloved and they change the culture. And that is the secret to my success, finding a subject that embodies both of those qualities. And that's it in a nutshell.
I love the fact there's a saying that friends of mine in radio say, no one taught Mick Jagger how to write songs. Nobody taught Paul McCartney how to write songs. No one told Bruce Springsteen how to do it, right? They all found their own path, and nobody can tell you how to be an artist. You just have to find your own path.
Same thing with Julia Child. Nobody ever told her how to cook. She just loved it. She loved to eat. She embraced it, and that became her trademark in her life, and she changed the world with that. So you're exactly right. That's what happens. You find your own path, you follow your path, and you have to be strong enough to believe that what you're doing is absolutely the only thing you could do in your life.
The book is The Rolling Stones, the biography, The Rolling Stones, Bob Spitz. What about the Knicks? Do we have a chance to get to the finals this year?
Boy, I hope so. I wrote about the Knicks and the championship team in 1969. I have been waiting for another Knicks 1969 championship team. I've never had it. So I would not put my money on that. Boy, they get close every year, but it falls apart. I've got my fingers crossed.
I am a long-suffering Knicks fan. I was 2 when they won their championship back then, so I don't really count that. And I still blame John Starks because he couldn't hit one of those threes in the finals against the Houston Rockets.
Exactly right. I am with you 100%. Absolutely. I was sitting there. I thought, this is it.
Yeah, and I'm not a Michael Jordan fan. I just want that on the record as well. All these people who love Michael Jordan, I still have nightmares over the man. Bob Spitz, it's been a wonderful conversation. Thank you very much. The author of The Beatles, Led Zeppelin, so many others. His new book getting a lot of attention, The Rolling Stones, The Biography, where all books are sold. Bob, good luck with your book tour, and thanks for checking in.
Thanks so much. I love talking to you.
You got it. The book, The Rolling Stones, The Biography, Bob Spitz. America at Night. Back in a moment.
America at Night with McGraw Milhaven. You're listening to America at Night with McGraw Milhaven.
All right, let's do this. Coming up in just one moment, we are going to be having open phones and text messages. We love the text messages. We love the open phones. Don't forget, this is a podcast, too, and we love to turn this into a podcast. And I love these people who say, I listen to podcasts. Podcast is talk radio. Podcast is talk radio without the phone calls because you can't. What show was I watching where they were doing a podcast and they were taking phone calls? And I was like, okay, that's ridiculous. And somebody said, what are you talking about? Oh, just because you're in radio, you think you're podcast. And I said, no, you can't take phone calls with a podcast because a podcast, they tape it in a studio somewhere and put a cassette on and they record it. So you can't call because it's not broadcasting. Oh, I hadn't thought about that. Good point, right? So podcasting is great. It's just like talk radio, except you don't have any interaction with the audience. That's the best part of talk radio. That's why we have open phones, and that's why we love phone calls, and we love first-time phone calls. So there you go. If you're listening to the show and you want to call in, we broadcast the third hour, or we record the third hour. We do it live on the air from, 10 to 11 Central Time. 10 to 11 Central Time. 11 to midnight Eastern Time. Don't ask me to do the math for West Coast because I'm not that smart. I've never really figured out the whole time zone thing, especially with these places like Arizona that doesn't spring forward and fall back. It makes my head hurt. So I don't really know what time we're live in Arizona. But we are live doing this third hour from 10 to 11. So text messages, you can always text message the show, 1-844-2-McGraw or 1-844-262-4700. 29. Of course, you can register for the podcast, sign up. It's free. It's open to the public. Anybody can do it. Just go to where any podcasts are housed, and we send them to all of the platforms, and just register for America at Night. Hit the click button, and they'll get it sent to your phone. It's as simple as that. Also, if you send your phone number to the text 1-844-2-McGraw, Alex will send you a link, and you can sign up for the daily. We have to come up with a name of that. The daily brief, the daily headlines. He'll tell you who's coming up on the show each and every night. Stay right there. Open phones. Our executive director is Alex Hinton. Our engineer tonight is Richard Good. I'm McGraw Milhaven, and this is America at Night on Westwood One.
Westwood One presents America at Night. Here's your host, McGraw Milhaven.
Welcome back. Hour number 3. It's Open Phones. I hope you were sticking around earlier in the night. We had 2 really interesting conversations. We talked with a woman who has wrote a book called Gouged, and talking about surveillance pricing. It's really interesting about how these big corporations are using our phones to change the pricing on us depending on our phones based on the algorithms. And that story she told about they did a secret shopper with Instagram. They got 400 people to buy the same items at the same time on Instacart. And they found a 23% difference from the highest pricing to the lowest pricing. It was a 23% price difference. And so they were reading the phones, and where they thought it was appropriate, they jacked up the price on some people, and then they didn't jack up the price on other people. So really very interesting in how not surge pricing and not supply and demand, but surveillance pricing. These corporations are changing the price based on your phone and the algorithms and the data that you provide. It's really interesting and pretty insidious, and it's only going to get worse. So we had that. And then we had Bob Spitz on last hour talking about the Rolling Stones. And what an interesting life that man's lived. To be a manager for Bruce Springsteen, and then to write books on the Beatles and Julia Child and Ronald Reagan, and now the Rolling Stones. So we had a couple of good conversations tonight. And now, of course, it's Open Phones. So whatever you want to talk about. Would love to stay away from politics because... well, for all sorts of reasons. But we can have an interesting conversation and talk about the facts. And your opinions are always welcome. And first-time phone callers are always welcome. 1-844-2-McGraw. If you are a first-time caller, tell Alex when he answers the phone, and we'll see if we might be able to bump you up or two. But we know it's a little give the first-time callers a little extra special treatment. 1-844-2-McGraw. 1-844-262-4729. Let's go to Joe in Connecticut. Joe, welcome to America at Night.
Good evening, Mr. McGraw.
Good evening, Mr. Joe.
I've been a mental patient for almost as many years as Mick has been a star.
God love you.
What I would like to talk about, unless you have questions for me, is character assassination.
Okay. Do you want to narrow it down any?
I want to know what you think of it, unless you want to know what I think of it.
I would probably say, if you were to ask me, I think character assassination is bad.
I would agree with you.
Okay. Do you have a little more? I mean, it's a pretty wide. It's pretty. I think everybody would agree with us that character
assassination is one of the oldest debate tactics. If you can't argue with the man's thoughts or reasons or logic, you attack the man.
Yes, it is. It's the oldest game in the trick used by everybody, usually who's guilty. When you're guilty and you cannot argue the facts, you go after the person who's delivering the facts.
Yes.
Yes.
And words can be more powerful than guns. And I know, as a great talk show host, you know that. Good or bad, words can be more powerful than guns.
Well, I do know the phrase "sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never hurt me."
Words can hurt you.
Well, there's a reason why. There's a reason why they want to take and they want to go after comedians who say things that are inappropriate, say things that aren't flattering, that make fun of people. There's a reason why comedians constantly get into trouble throughout the generations. Joe, thanks for the phone call. Let's go to Dave in Washington. Dave, welcome to America at Night. Dave, are you
Hello.
there? Hello, Dave. You're on the air.
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear. You sound great.
All right, good. Hey, I'm kind of a new listener. I really like your show.
Well,
You started carrying it in our area. But I'm kind of curious. I was under the impression that you might have been a Cardinals fan. You're in St. Louis, but you're not. What's your team?
Well, I am a Cardinals fan, but here's
okay, good.
here's I grew up in New York, Long Island, and I'm a Mets fan and always have been a Mets fan. My father took me to Met games. My mother took me to games. That's why the marriage never worked. One of the reasons. And so I'm a lifelong Mets fan, but I've been in St. Louis for 27 years now. And if you had the choice to be a Mets fan or a Cardinal fan, which would you choose?
I would choose the Mariners.
Okay, well, fair enough. But but the Cardinals have been. So I've always loved the Cardinals. I always loved the history. And being up close and personal with the Cardinals all these years, I have certainly a place in my heart for the St. Louis Cardinals.
Right on. Well, I appreciate that. I was just kind of curious. I seemed like you were into baseball a bit, so I thought I'd ask and keep it off politics.
Yeah, no. Thanks, I appreciate it. Seattle, I'll tell you what, they've come a long way. I know. They've got some right. They've got some talent this year. They might. They got off to a slow start, but they might do some damage this year.
I'm hoping they get me through the year.
Yeah, there's nothing like baseball season.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, Dave. Anything else? Have a good one, Dave. Thanks for checking in. Man. Appreciate it. You got it. Call back anytime. We'll talk baseball with you anytime. Let's go to Rob in Wichita, Kansas. Rob, hello. Welcome to America at Night.
Hello, McGraw.
Hello, hey, Rob. Turn your radio down.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, let me turn the radio down.
Rookie mistake.
Oh, I'm a second-time caller. I should have known that.
No problem. What do you got, Rob?
Well, like I told your screener, I keep hearing the newsreader report that the Supreme Court weakened the civil rights law, and I don't see it that way at all. I think they strengthened it by getting rid of racial gerrymandering. What say you?
It's an interesting debate, right? It's I need to do a little bit more of a deeper dive, but you're right. There is something to the conundrum of trying to make voting more equal by race, or making it equal to vote by all the races, and by doing that, looking at somebody's race and then creating a district based on race. There seems to be a conundrum there. It doesn't seem to make sense, right? The only way to save the baby is to split the baby in half. That doesn't make any sense to me. But on the other hand, there is no doubt that there is a long history of trying to depress the vote in certain areas. Now it's 2026, right? A lot of those things have sort of gone away for the most part. People are afraid that they might come back. But on the other hand, I also think gerrymandering is probably the worst thing that has been created in this country, and it's only getting worse, which I think is bad. So I don't know how to fix it, but I think it's awful that a state could draw the districts so that only one party has all of the congressmen or all the congressional districts in one state. I think it's a broken system, whether it's all Republicans or all Democrats. And the more we gerrymander, the worse this is going to get.
Do you know how many congressional representatives all 6 New England states have?
No, I do not.
How about 0? Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Vermont, Maine.
No. Oh, yeah. So they've all gerrymandered Republicans out of their seats.
Now that's got to be corrected.
I agree. There's no doubt that makes for a broken system. And I don't know what Texas has, but there was another state that, like Missouri, I think they've switched it now to only have 1. And it's a broken system when the voters don't choose their electors, their politicians, but the politicians choose their voters. I don't know how to fix it, but the system is broken, and it's only getting worse.
We got a local talk show host who came up with the idea a couple years ago of the electoral college for states. Have you heard of that movement?
Yes, I have. It's an interesting debate, one in which we probably can't get on here. Rob, thanks for checking in. I appreciate the phone call. I got to take a break. 1-844-2-McGraw, 1-844-262-4729. First-time phone callers, we love you. Long-time callers, we love you. First-time callers, well, how's that go? Long-time callers, first-time listeners, we love those people as well. America at Night, back in a moment.
Join the conversation. Call 844-2-McGraw. America at Night with McGraw Milhaven. Welcome back to America at Night. Call now, 844-262-4729. That's 844-2-McGraw.
All right, what do we got here? Let's go back to the phones. We've got line 2, Barron in Lansing, Michigan. Barron, welcome to America at Night.
Good night. How are you?
Good. How are you? Thanks for calling.
Yeah, so I have a question and kind of a statement. I'm kind of trying to get my head around what gerrymandering is. But from my understanding, gerrymandering was created back in the day where most people were voting black, and they redistrict areas to make them more democratic so that black people had more of a chance to get a fair vote. Mm-hmm. Is that correct?
Well, gerrymandering goes all the way back to the beginning of the Republic, right? When they said that we would have two houses, one Senate where you have 2 senators from each state, and then the House of Representatives is predicated on population. And so you have these districts. Well, every 10 years they take a census, and every 10 years we determine where people are living and how many people are living in a certain state. And then each state is apportioned the correct number of House members. And then they're cut up into districts, and then you vote. Well, you can draw the districts any way you want. And so you can draw a district. I'm just making these numbers up, but let's say a state has 4 House seats, and it's it's a Republican state 55-45 in the last election. Well, you could draw those districts so that there's a very good possibility that you get 2 Republicans and 2 Democrats. There's also a way to draw those districts where you could get 3 Republicans and 1 Democrat. And there's a way where you could probably draw those districts where you could get 4 Republicans and 0 Democrats. And so that's gerrymandering. They are gerrymandering, and there used to be specific laws as to how you could gerrymander. They had to be contiguous. You couldn't do it based on race, but then they were drawn on race so that the African Americans would have a better chance to have better representation. And so that was without going into the legalese of all of that. That was struck down today.
So I believe that that's a good thing that it was struck down because, I mean, people's votes are changing every election. All black people are not voting Democratic anymore. So just because you're getting more Democratic seats does not necessarily mean that you're getting a better representation of what black people want.
No, I agree. That's true. But there's also the other truth is that how many House members are black from Republican districts? Very few, if any. I don't know of any. Remember, there was J.C. Watts in Oklahoma, but outside of him, there haven't been too many others. I don't know the full makeup, but there are many more African Americans who are Democrats in the House than there are Republicans. Now, is that because they're blacks? There's also something that says that there's a philosophy that blacks will only vote for blacks and white will only vote for whites. And I reject that premise, even though it may be true to some extent. I find that somewhat offensive because I have no problem voting for a black person. I have no problem voting for a white person. But the system at large says, and now this is one of the reasons why it was struck down, is that, just because you're black doesn't mean a black person is going to vote for you.
Exactly. And that's my point. It's been proven in this last couple of elections that, we've had many black people in seats that were voted out. And, black people did not vote for them.
Yeah.
I think color has to be taken out of the whole situation. Of course, you're always going to have a percentage of people who are going to just vote their color, but the percentage of that group of people is shrinking tremendously, the longer America lives.
Well, it's also the affirmative action in law schools, right? Giving somebody a leg up only because of the color of their skin. Should Barack Obama's daughters get a leg up on my daughter? Right? They clearly have a leg up on my daughter, who's white. They're black. So why should they get a leg up when it comes to affirmative action? So, but again, there's many African Americans who wouldn't get an opportunity unless they were, given a leg up, if you will. So I don't know. It's very confusing. I got a break. The music says we got to go. Barron, call back anytime. Good stuff. That was a good phone call. Enjoyed talking to you about it. Stay right there. We're just getting started. America at Night. Open phones continues after this.
You're listening to America at Night with McGraw Milhaven. What's on your mind? Call 844-2-McGraw and be a part of America at Night with McGraw Milhaven.
All right, we got open phones tonight. Let's go back to the phones. Let's go to Scott in St. Louis. Scott, welcome to America at Night.
Yeah.
Hold on a second. Hold on. You're going to have to start off with a non-political topic tonight. So what's your non-political topic tonight?
Okay. Well, I went to London in 1985.
No. It's got to be more. It's got to be more topical than 1985. Something newsworthy. Something you did in the last 48 hours that has nothing to do with politics that you want to comment on.
Well, the thing the thing in London has nothing to do with politics.
Okay, well, all right, we'll start there. What happened in 1985 in London?
Well, I went over there, and the British generally are kind of aloof. They're kind of cold, and so I went in this pub, and and there's this woman there, and she's attractive, a blonde woman. And she says hi to me like, in such a welcoming, friendly way. And I looked at her for a second. I thought she kind of had pale skin, and she was too attractive to be hitting on me. So I said to her, I said, "Are you Irish?" And she said, "Yes, I am." All the Irish people over there in London, they kind of stood out because they were nice to me. Whereas the British are polite, but they're not very.
You know what I take from this story? The British people know you. That's why they're not very nice to you.
I don't know. Well, I'm a tourist. They knew I was a tourist.
Fair enough. All right.
About the Supreme Court. The decision they made, it's probably not going to impact this upcoming election because a lot of states have already done their primaries, and I can't imagine they're going to change their districts between the primary and the general election.
Well, they can't do that, but if they can, they will. So I know Florida jumped on it. If they can, they will. That is for sure.
Well, Florida, now, they have time in Florida, but the problem is their constitution says they're not supposed to gerrymander.
Yeah,
so
well, everybody gerrymanders in one way, shape, or form.
There's going to be a lawsuit, and that's going to slow things down. And also, they're not so sure.
Gerrymandering is the scourge of this society, and we haven't been able to solve that riddle since the beginning.
Right.
That's why you have just polar opposites and nobody in the middle. No, we don't send people to Washington who are normal. We send the people who are on the extremes, and that's what you get. You get the extremes when you over gerrymander these districts. On both sides.
Well, the apparently the voters, their two top concerns, according to this one poll, is health care costs and the price of gasoline.
Well, I can tell you one thing. Healthcare prices ain't going down anytime soon because the people we send to Washington aren't going to agree on anything. So, Scott, I got to go. Thanks for the phone call.
Okay.
Let's go to Gil in San Antonio. Gil, welcome to America at Night.
Yes, congratulations. Yesterday, the Mets shut out the Washington Nationals.
Yes, and then they lost today big. So one step forward, two steps back.
Well, gee, I had another theory. I thought maybe with all the DEI in Washington, the Nationals was a girls' team. But that was supposed to be a joke. But,
that was a joke, yes. I chortled.
Okay. yesterday you had on Grace Stanke, the former Miss America nuclear
Yes.
waste person. Okay.
Yes.
I sent you a text, and it was an error. I said that France got 100% of their electricity from nuclear energy. They did 20 years ago, and that's a problem when you're my age, your life's years. But I went and checked. They get 74% of their energy from nuclear power, and they get the rest from what they call renewables, solar and wind.
Interesting.
But they don't use any fossil fuels. She did say one thing that is an error, and I know that you have a search engine there. The largest nuclear power plant in the United States is in a desert in Arizona where there's no lake. It's called Palo Verde. And the reason I know so much about it is because I used to live in El Paso, and El Paso Electric was one of the companies that put in up the money to build it, and they doubled our utility rates to build it. It's cooled by some water from the Colorado River, and all the wastewater from Phoenix. And I have a friend who's a stand-up comic in Phoenix, a woman, and I gave her a line that when she's doing her act and people stand up to go to the restroom, she says, now don't forget, flush it twice. It's a long way to Palo Verde. And
ladies
always
and
gets laughs with that line.
Ladies and gentlemen, Gil performing twice on Wednesdays here on America at Night. Gil, good stuff. Thanks for checking in. Danny in Rolla. Danny, you're on America at Night.
Hey, you were talking. We talked last night about the guy that did the shooting on Saturday, and you said, well, I don't want to talk about mentally ill, but if by that metric, anybody that doesn't think like you do or like I do or anywhere in the middle, by definition, is mentally ill, are they not?
I mean, just because you think differently than me, I think you're mentally ill? No, I don't think that.
No. Okay. Let me put it to you like this. Does that mean that everybody in prison is mentally ill? If anybody that takes a gun to propagate any kind of political action, does that mean that they're insane?
No. There are no absolutes in this world. I mean, it's on a case by case basis. But if somebody shoots up a school, what else could it be other than mentally unstable? What I mean,
you're old enough to remember Teddy Kaczynski. I don't think that anybody would call him stupid or mentally insane. He knew what he was doing. So if you know what you're doing and you do it anyway, you're just, I don't know, evil, a bad guy. I don't know.
I think that's a simplistic look at things. I think there are drug deals that go by where it's, kill or be killed. There are all sorts of reasons to shoot someone where you're mentally sane. But if you go into a school and you shoot up somebody, or you go into a dinner on a Saturday night after you've been a normal functioning human being for years, and somehow you become radicalized. What?
McGraw, hold on a minute. He's from California. He didn't just go to a dinner on a Saturday night. He planned this. He had a manifesto. He traveled from California to Washington,
Okay,
D.C.
Danny. No, Danny, listen to me. This is the third night we've had this discussion. We can disagree. I can say he's mentally unstable. You can say he's of sound mind. We can agree to disagree. Okay?
Well, I just don't think it's all that easy. But okay, I do have two other things real quick.
Go
One,
ahead.
as far as politics goes, three things. One, the Cardinals won tonight, 3 games in a row. So it's
Cardinals.
not all about politics.
Cardinals are back,
Second
baby.
thing,
Yes.
well, the second thing is part of the reason that politics takes up so much space in so many people's heads is that 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 50 years ago, yeah, you may have had differences, but you weren't at polar opposites. You could agree on some things. These days, the divide is massive. And the last thing is that meritocracy, I mean, that should count. It should not be based on race or anything else. It's whoever, the best gets it. And I did have one other point, but I'll make it quick. The gerrymandering thing, way back in the day, landowners had the vote, and if you didn't own land, you didn't vote. Well, if you didn't own land, your kids still went to school, so that made a difference. But now, instead of land ownership, it's based on population density. And if you look at the state of Illinois, Chicago runs the entire state of Illinois politically. Am I wrong?
No, there's a lot of, that's where the most population is, yes. I would say that Chicago and Northern Illinois has a large influence on what happens in the state of Illinois.
Is that not unfair? Is that not almost like land ownership because you have the population? I don't know if there's a better way. If there is, I don't know what it is.
I'm not
anyway,
against.
That's all I got.
Thanks.
Have a
Thanks,
good
Danny.
night, brother.
You got it. I'm against severe gerrymandering to the point where one party has no voice in the state. I understand gerrymandering. I understand gaming the system. But when you have a state like Massachusetts that has no Republican representatives in the House, or a state like Texas where you have a huge state and you've just gerrymandered all the Democrats out of getting a seat, I don't think that's good for America. Might be good for your party, but I don't think it's good for America. Paul in Boise, Idaho. Paul, welcome to America at Night.
Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
No, I was making an observation watching the King of England while he was here with President Trump. I think they got along famously again, and they seem to enjoy themselves. And I think that was part of the reason why he was here, other than talking about NATO and some other important business. But
it was the charm offensive.
Yeah,
The reason why King Charles came to America, it was the charm offensive. It was that was the single reason why he was here, was to charm Donald Trump, and I think he hit it out of the ballpark.
I'm not going to argue at that point. Yeah, they both seem to be like they were enjoying themselves, and who's to say that one didn't kind of snooker the other? But yeah, I'd kind of like to see some fences mended, and the guy that's responsible for deciding not to have what's McGraw?
What's that?
Never mind.
Okay.
Never mind.
Paul.
Okay,
Paul. Thanks for the phone call. I think seeing the King of England give a speech to a joint session of Congress was pretty cool. As we celebrate our 250th anniversary, you ever think King George would have come and spoke to a joint session of Congress. I don't know. I know it was 250 years ago. A lot has happened. I know Great Britain is our closest ally in the world. I know we're cousins, right? We were born of Great Britain. But to see the King of England give a speech to Congress, I don't know. I thought it was pretty cool because you don't see that very often. You just don't see the King of England. I'm still not used to calling him the King of England. We were so used to the Queen. It's weird to say the King of England and mean it as like a present day person. But yeah, no, I thought it was very special. And I thought his line about, and I'm going to butcher it, but the line where he says about President Trump's East Ballroom, and he said that the Brits tried to renovate the White House back in 1812 when the Brits burned the White House down is a pretty funny line. That's a pretty funny line. That's the charm offensive. And everybody got a laugh. And he said that our relationship is about the future. And he pointed to NATO is an important alliance. And that's what I believe. So that was interesting and historic nonetheless. All right, stay right there. America at Night, back in a moment.
Miss a portion of tonight's show? Not a problem. Go to americaatnightlive.com to find a replay of every show. This is America at Night with McGraw Milhaven.
Hey, the text line's keeping me honest. I said the White House burned in 1812. I was wrong. The text message from New Mexico, the White House burned in 1814. I apologize. The White House did burn in 1814 during the War of 1812. So I apologize. Anyway, I got my dates mixed up. I was talking about the War of 1812. The White House burned during the War of 1812 in 1814. Personally, I don't think that's the wrong name for the war. The war should be called the War between 1812 and 1814. But I digress. Hey, that's going to do it for us on America at Night. Don't forget the podcast. You can download the podcast each and every night. Listen to it. If you missed it, if 1 hour was preempted or you want to send it to somebody else, you heard an interview you liked, that's the whole idea. We love it when you download the podcast and be part of the show. Also, when you text, ask for the lineup. Each and every night, Alex will send you the lineup. Tomorrow night on the program, should we, you know what we're going to do? Well, I haven't decided yet what we're going to do tomorrow night. But we got Bill Cleveland, Bill on the road. And we're going to talk to a professor about the poly markets and that soldier who got caught up in betting on the Nicaraguan war or the Nicaraguan police action or the Nicaraguan military excursion to pick up Nicolas Maduro. All right, we'll do that tomorrow. Have a great night. Our executive director is Alex Hinton. Our engineer tonight is Richard Good. I'm McGraw Milhaven, and this is America at Night on Westwood One.